Picture this. You're an imperial citizen on some backwater planet in the 41st millennium. One day, your neighbor, previously a healthy fellow, starts coughing up black phlegm. Pustules bloom on his skin. Within a week, he's a bloated, rotting husk of a man. His eyes have melted into one milky orb in the center of his face, a crooked horn is sprouting from his forehead, and the smell is putrid. He shambles toward you, leaving pieces of himself with every step, arms outstretched as if to offer a hug. That is not a hug you want. You see, your neighbor isn't your neighbor anymore. He's Papa Nurgle's newest child, patient zero of a plague that laughs at lasguns and makes a mockery of any medicine. And as he reaches for you, grinning through dripping gore, you realize this nightmare isn't a bad fever dream at all. It's everyday reality in the grim darkness of Warhammer 40,000. Welcome to a galaxy where curses are real and they are utterly horrifying. In this universe, you won't find fairy tale hexes or mild bad luck. No, we're talking about fates worse than death. Today, we're unmasking Warhammer 40K's most horrifying curses, the twisted plagues, hexes, and damnations that corrupt flesh and devour souls. Grab your purity seal and say a prayer to the God Emperor, or whatever deity might listen. You're going to need all the help you can get. Let's dive into the horrors, shall we? But be warned, after hearing these cursed tales, you might just sleep with the lights on, if you can sleep at all. Nurgle's Rot, the blessing of Decay. Our first curse comes from everyone's favorite galactic grandfather of grossness. Nurgle, the chaos god of plague and pestilence. Nurgle is a jovial, jolly figure who just loves to share. Unfortunately, what he shares are diseases that make the Black Death look like a case of the sniffles. His grandest achievement, a little number called Nurgle's Rot. Nurgle's Rot, often just called the Rot, is the most potent, horribly contagious demonic plague in existence. Think of every awful illness you can imagine. Ebola, smallpox, the works. Roll them together, multiply by 1,000, and then sprinkle in some literal demonic magic for good measure. That's Nurgle's Rot. It doesn't kill you quickly, oh no. That would be far too kind. Instead, it works slowly and artistically, turning you into a bloated, living corpse teeming with the stuff of nightmares. What does that mean? Well, as the rot takes hold, your blood congeals into a black sludge and your flesh starts to bubble and slough off. You'll watch in horror as your own body liquefies in places and grows unnatural new additions elsewhere. Perhaps your eyes fuse together into one gross, globular eye, staring blindly from a face that's sagging off your skull. Maybe a horn sprouts from your forehead, twisting upward like some sick parody of a unicorn. Lesions burst open across your body, oozing foul fluids and squirming with insect larvae. Your belly swells with corruption, your limbs distort. You become a waddling sack of pus and filth, barely recognizable as the person you once were. Neighbors will retch at the sight of you, assuming they haven't caught it too by then, because one of the rot's worst aspects is that it's extremely contagious. A single cough, a touch of contaminated sweat, or the bite of one of the buzzing demon flies that follow Nurgle's cultists, and snap, you're infected. Entire hive city populations have been reduced to dribbling plague zombies because one unlucky soul shook the wrong unwashed hand. As your body rots away, you might hope for the sweet release of death. But Nurgle's rot is as much a spiritual curse as a physical one, and it's not about to let something as trivial as death cheat it. The disease gnaws on your soul as greedily as it wrecks your flesh. Victims often find their mind and spirit corrupted, their thoughts turning strangely jolly despite the horror. That's one of the most perverse things. Some sufferers actually start to giggle and praise Nurgle through their bloody coughing fits, overcome by the god's gift of bizarre contentment even as their toes drop off. You'll have moments of clarity where you realize you're literally rotting alive, and you might even try to end it all to escape the pain. But the disease won't let you die easily. It'll keep you alive, stewing in decay, until you either fully give in and embrace Nurgle's love, or someone puts you out of your misery, assuming they can get close enough without catching it themselves. And when you finally do die, that's when the real fun begins. See, Nurgle calls this curse his greatest blessing. If you perish from Nurgle's rot, your soul doesn't get to rest. Oh no. Your soul takes a little trip straight into Nurgle's garden in the warp, where it's reborn as a plague-bearer demon. Congratulations. You get to spend eternity as a one-eyed, one-horned, plague-carrying demon, shuffling around counting diseases and spreading filth in Grandpa Nurgle's stinking garden. That's the honor bestowed on victims of Nurgle's rot. You become one of the Lord of Decay's immortal servants, doomed to eternally inflict on others the same sickness that killed you. It's the ultimate cruel punchline. What was a nightmare curse in life becomes your literal afterlife job. Imperial authorities fear Nurgle's rot so much that if any case is discovered on a planet, the Inquisition doesn't mess around. They might declare exterminatus immediately. That's right. They will wipe out a whole planet, kill every single living thing on it, rather than risk this plague spreading. They've seen entire worlds turned into foetid charnel houses by one outbreak. And frankly, even exterminatus is merciful compared to letting the rot run its course. Better a quick death by orbital bombardment than an agonizing transformation into a pustule-ridden demon slave of chaos. Nurgle's rot has many cute pet names: the Spoiler's Gift, the Curse of the Walking Pox, the Mother of all Plagues. But whatever you call it, it's pure horror. It embodies the sick humor of its patron god, a gift that no one in their right mind would ever want. Imagine a disease so malevolent that it literally steals your soul and drags it to hell after making you watch your body decay piece by piece. That's Nurgle's pride and joy. Feeling itchy yet? Maybe a little feverish? Don't worry, and I'm sure it's nothing. Probably not the rot at all. Probably. The zombie plague. Curse of unbelief. Death just isn't the end. As if Nurgle's rot wasn't enough to worry about, old Papa Nurgle has plenty of other disgusting curses up his moldy sleeves. Let's talk about another crowd pleaser, the zombie plague, also grimly known as the Curse of Unbelief. If Nurgle's rot is his magnum opus, the zombie plague is like one of his favorite remixes, a different spin on the whole "let's completely ruin everything" tune. And ruin it does. This curse turns its victims into, surprise, plague zombies. Now, you might be thinking of your run-of-the-mill zombie from horror vids, shuffling, moaning, trying to eat your brains. And you'd be right, except these zombies aren't caused by some lab virus or voodoo magic, but by the potent whim of the plague god himself, which means it's not just a disease, it's a warp-spawned horror that laughs at conventional science. The zombie plague spreads through a combination of an actual infectious pathogen and a demonic curse. It's said to particularly afflict those weak in faith, hence, Curse of Unbelief. In the theology of the Imperium, if you don't have the Emperor in your heart, your body is a wide-open door for Nurgle's nasties. Whether that's strictly true or just ecclesiarchy scare propaganda, here's what definitely happens. An infected person will sicken and die. Symptoms include, dying, usually after some lovely high fever, vomiting, and skin necrosis. But death is not clock-out time for this illness. The corpse rises back up, animated by a warp-born malice. What shambles toward you is not your friend or family member anymore. It's a mindless meat puppet driven by plague and sorcery. Its flesh is cold, its eyes are dull, and it absolutely will try to devour you because 1, it's hungry for living flesh, and 2, spreading the infection is all it wants. Now, imagine this happening across an entire city. One by one, people collapse and die, only to claw their way back up and attack the living. Panic spreads even faster than the plague. PDF troopers or arbitrators might gun down some of the first zombies, only to have the very wounds splatter infected blood on the shooters, dooming them to join the growing horde soon. Within days, you've got a classic zombie apocalypse on your hands, but dialed up to 11 by the warp's power. The air itself grows foul with the psychic stink of Nurgle's curse. Sometimes the sky literally darkens as if in perpetual dreary twilight. Survivors huddle in bunkers or atop hive spires, praying for deliverance as hordes of plague zombies shuffle through the streets, breaking down doors, piling over barricades in relentless waves. They can be hard to put down for good, short of blasting them to pieces or burning them to ash. They just keep getting back up. Sever a zombie's limb and the severed arm might still be crawling, fingers grasping for your ankle. To make matters worse, there are accounts that sometimes chaos psychers or sorcerers can control these zombies like a macabre conductor leading an undead orchestra. On planets overrun by the zombie plague, cult leaders or demon-infested madmen have been seen herding the zombie masses toward pockets of survivors. Think of it, an ocean of rotund, gray-skinned former civilians, eyes vacant and skin peeling, all converging on you while chanting some blasphemous litany wheezed through rotten vocal cords. It's enough to break even a Space Marine's resolve. And indeed, this plague has shown up in wars. During the notorious siege of Vrax, for example, Nurgle-worshipping forces unleashed plague zombies against Imperial attackers, creating chaos and horror on the battlefield as guardsmen realized the enemies shambling toward them were, in fact, the reanimated corpses of their own fallen comrades. No morale boost there. The Inquisition's Ordo Sepulturum exists almost solely to monitor and counter things like the zombie plague. They've theorized all sorts of links. Some whisper that the curse might be related to ancient tech used in the Emperor's Golden Throne, or some Dark Age experiment gone wrong. Others say it's simply one of Nurgle's countless gifts to humanity. Grandfather just expressing his love again by turning entire hive populations into cannibalistic undead. How sweet. Regardless, the solution from the Imperial standpoint tends to be the same as with Nurgle's rot. Purge with fire. Ask questions never. If an infestation gets out of hand, exterminatus is again on the table. The Imperium has blown up its own worlds to contain this curse, and honestly, can you blame them? Imagine being an Inquisitor faced with a planet of billions of zombies that could, if they escape, carry the plague to other systems. You'd have to sleep at night knowing you let spacefaring zombies become a thing. No thanks. Press the big red button. The zombie trope may be familiar to us in fiction, but in Warhammer 40K it's as real as last bolts and chainswords. And of course, because it's 40K, it can't just be a normal undead outbreak. It's a demonically charged, galaxy-spanning curse with potentially apocalyptic stakes. Next time you hear a shambling in the dark, pray it's just a lone, hungry ghoul and not the harbinger of a full-blown chaos zombie apocalypse. If it's the latter, well, you might want to double-check that cyanide pill in your tooth, or start practicing your headshot aim for your soon-to-be zombified loved ones. In the 41st millennium, sometimes the kindest bullet is the one you save for your infected friend. The butcher's nails, when your rage is hardwired. Not all curses in the 41st millennium are esoteric, warp-spawned plagues. Some are man-made or xeno-made horrors that effectively curse their victims just the same. For an example, let's turn to the charming tradition of cranial impalement practiced by the Legion, once known as the World Eaters. We're talking about the infamous Butcher's Nails. Now, the Butcher's Nails aren't a curse in the spell sense. They're actually a piece of archaic tech, a set of implants that get hammered literally into the brain. Sounds delightful already, right? But these implants might as well be a curse because of what they do to their recipient. The World Eater Space Marines, led by their Primarch Angron, adopted this technology during the Great Crusade era. Angron himself was a victim of these nails back on his homeworld. Devices forced into his brain by slave masters to turn him into an ever-angry, ever-lethal gladiator. The nails stimulate aggression and suppress other emotions. They flood the brain with pain and fury until the only relief comes from violence. When Angron became a Primarch, and later a Demon Primarch of Khorne, he basically said, "Wow, this personal hell of mine is great, let's share it with my sons." So his Legion's apothecaries started installing butcher's nails in their own Astartes. What's it like having the nails in your head? In a word, agonizing. The devices constantly cause excruciating pain that can only be temporarily quelled by spilling blood and fighting. You literally have to hurt others to take the edge off your own hurt. If that isn't a twisted curse, I don't know what is. Marines with the nails gradually lose their ability to feel anything aside from rage. Higher reasoning, restraint, fear, mercy, all those go out the window. What's left is a berserker who knows only hatred and bloodlust. They become effectively crazed attack dogs, foaming at the mouth inside their skulls, straining to be unleashed on the enemy just so they can get a moment's respite from the nails' torture. In battle, this turns them into terrifying shock troops. A World Eater with butcher's nails hammered in cares nothing for strategy or even self-preservation. He'll charge headlong into gunfire, chainsword revving, bolter blazing, utterly consumed by the need to kill. It makes them monstrous killers, sure, but it also robs them of their sanity, their humanity, and ultimately their souls. They're effectively cursed to live in constant suffering when not fighting, and in a kind of ecstatic homicidal trance when they are fighting. The legacy of this curse: the entire Legion slid into insanity and demonic worship of Khorne, the blood god who exemplifies mindless slaughter. The Butcher's Nails were like a gateway drug that predisposed the World Eaters to embrace the Chaos God of Rage, since his whole vibe matched what they were already experiencing internally. Eventually, over millennia, the World Eaters devolved into roaming warbands of Khornate berserkers, many of them literally too angry to speak, too far gone to do anything except charge and kill. They are cursed never to know peace or calm again, only blood and more blood until someone finally puts them down. And even then, Khorne might just snap up their soul for eternal combat in the warp. This all started from a technology that was supposed to make them better fighters. Isn't that rich? A so-called upgrade that essentially damned an entire legion. The Butcher's Nails turned human, albeit superhuman, warriors into frenzied monsters. If that isn't a form of curse, albeit delivered through a surgeon's drill rather than a sorcerer's ritual, I'll eat my flak helmet. The horrifying thing is, some World Eaters know it's a curse. Kharn the Betrayer, one of Angron's sons, sometimes has these moments of clarity. Imagine brief seconds of realizing, "Emperor, help me, what have I become?" before the nails crank his brain back to berserk mode. That's like a micro-hell, fleeting lucidity in an eternity of madness. And even Angron, the origin of all this, is basically a berserk demon whining in rare, lucid moments about the pain in his head. A Primarch, one of the Emperor's mightiest, reduced to that. It's tragic, in a butcherous sort of way. So beware of quick fixes that promise combat prowess at the cost of your mind. The Butcher's nails demonstrate that a curse in 40K doesn't always need a wizard. Sometimes it's the outcome of human or alien cruelty and a bad idea that just won't die. In the end, whether a curse slithers out of the warp or is bolted into your skull by your own battle brothers, the result is similar. You lose yourself, and something monstrous takes your place. For the World Eaters, that monster was Angron's legacy, a legacy of endless angry slaughter. A curse by any other name, still making you see red all day, every day. Spawndom, the fate worse than death for Chaos champions. Chaos is a tempting path, power, immortality, the chance to make reality your plaything. Sounds fun until you read the fine print. And nowhere is that fine print more horrifying than in the fate of those who displease, or sometimes simply amuse, the Dark God's Chaos spawn. Yes, I'm calling it now. Spawndom is absolutely a curse, and one of the most horrifying in Warhammer 40K, because it's essentially a cosmic gotcha that can befall those who reach too high. Imagine you're a champion of chaos. You've been out there raiding worlds, sacrificing captives, shouting the 8 billion names of the Dark Pantheon, all in hopes of gaining the gods' favor. You want the big prize, ascension to Demon Prince, immortality as a powerful demonic being. Many have tried, few succeed. The thing is, the Chaos gods are fickle, cruel, and have a wicked sense of humor. Instead of the glorious ascension you hoped for, they might just say, "Nah, we're bored of you," and flick their proverbial finger. Poof. All those gifts of mutation they'd been giving you, the extra arms, the snake tail, the weird eyeball in your armpit, suddenly go into overdrive. Uncontrolled explosive mutation racks your body and shreds your sanity. In moments, you transform from a fearsome warlord in spiky power armor to a writhing, mindless abomination, a chaos spawn. A chaos spawn is basically a mass of fleshy madness. It's unique every time, an amalgam of twisted limbs, tentacles, maws, pincers, eyeballs, scales, slime, you name it. The gods basically unravel the form they had given you. All that remains is a gibbering creature driven by pain and base impulses. Your human intellect? Gone. Any semblance of who you were? Vaporized. Now you're effectively an insane mutated beast, often herded into battle by your former comrades on a chain, or prodded forward like some attack dog, if they don't just kill you out of disgust. It's arguably a fate worse than death, because at least if you died, it's over. As a spawn, you persist, possibly for years, decades, or even horrifyingly forever. Some spawns are effectively immortal unless killed. You get to live out your days as a shameful, monstrous mockery. Chaos, Space Marines, and cultists alike fear this fate deeply. They talk about it in hushed tones. So-and-so became a spawn. It's like the ultimate cautionary tale among traitors. Even the mightiest can fall to it. Remember I'm sorry, Abaddon, the despoiler's little blunder in one of the Black Crusades? He had a bunch of Chaos Lords under him vying for favor. One of them, let's call him Lord Too Ambitious, thought he could use a powerful Chaos artifact to one-up Abaddon. The Dark God's response? Spawn City. His glorious Terminator armored form was reduced to a slithering slime trail thing that Abaddon promptly squashed like an insect. Another example. During the Horus Heresy, the Thousand Suns Space Marines were suffering rampant mutation. the flesh change, more on that later. Those who fell to it essentially turned into spawn-like creatures and had to be put down by their own brothers with flamers. Imagine the horror of your fellow super-psychic marines turning into mewling flesh beasts in front of you. Sorry, brother, you're a heap of tentacles now. I have to incinerate you. That's what chaos can do. Being turned into a spawn isn't exactly random either. It often comes as a direct reward, heavy on the air quotes, from the gods if you disappoint them. Maybe you lost a battle you were supposed to win in their name. Maybe you offended your patron with a moment of weakness, or, ironically, too much pride. Or maybe no reason at all. Chaos does as it pleases. 1 second you're pledging yourself body and soul, the next second your body and soul are violently unmade and remade into a pile of goo with teeth. Surprise? The existence of Chaos's spawn is such a perverse joke. The same cultists who cheer when their champion gets blessed with, say, a fancy new mutation, like, "Ooh, tentacle arm, great is the favor of the gods," know in the back of their minds that too many gifts leads to being an uncontrollable mutation bomb. But they'll never admit it out loud, not unless they want to invite that outcome. It's the cruel carrot and stick. Chase power. But if you overstep, wham, the stick hits, and you're a spawn. Spawns are not even respected or pitied by their own. They're used as living weapons, penned into warp-tinged cages, and unleashed in battle to sow chaos, pun intended. They charge toward the enemy, flailing and screaming, often absorbing ridiculous amounts of fire because their mutated forms can be monstrously resilient. There's nothing strategic about them. They're shock troops and terror weapons, and if they survive a battle, they might be recycled into the next fight, or simply driven off into the wastes to be rid of them. Only a few Chaos warbands bother to keep them around. Some develop a sick attachment, like, "This twisted thing used to be my buddy, I'll feed it prisoners and keep it in the basement." Most see spawns as living trash. So here's the grim cosmic irony. The most faithful servants of chaos, those who try hardest to earn dark glory, risk being cursed into perhaps the lowest form of existence on the chaos totem pole. It's as if the gods say, "You want a gift? Fine. Here's the gift of being a slug monster. Enjoy." It exemplifies that chaos has no true loyalty or fairness, only appetite for amusement. And nothing amuses these dark gods more than pulling the rug out from under their worshippers in the cruelest way possible. In short, Spawndom is the curse that lurks behind every promise of chaos. It's a transformation that annihilates identity and dignity, leaving only horror. It's why even insane chaos champions sometimes shudder when they hear a fellow warlord was blessed a little too much. In this casino, the house always wins. And if you gamble with chaos, the prize for failure is to become a mindless spawn. Roll the dice, heretics, but don't say you weren't warned. The Obliterator Virus, flesh, steel, and damnation. So far, we've seen diseases that rot you, curses that undeadify you, and implants that drive you murderously insane. How about a curse that fuses your flesh with metal and turns you into a grotesque living arsenal? Meet the Obliterator Virus, a horror born somewhere in the warp-soaked depths of chaos, where biology and technology meld in unholy union. This one's a real treat for all you body horror fans out there. If you've ever worried you spend too much time with your gadgets, this virus says, "Hey, why not just become the gadget?" The Obliterator Virus is a techno-organic virus. Its origins are mysterious. Some say it was Nurgle's doing. Plagues are his thing, after all. Others whisper it was an experiment by Fabius Bile that twisted apothecary loves cooking up nightmares. And some even think the Iron Warriors Legion engineered a strain of it. However it started, what matters is what it does. It infects primarily space marines, especially those who have a fondness for heavy weapons. and it rewrites them, literally, on a cellular level. Stage by stage, the unlucky victim of this blessing undergoes a transformation. Early on, it might seem benign. The infected warrior just finds his weapons a bit easier to use, his aim truer. "Great. I feel one with my gun," he might boast. Uh-huh. You have no idea how literal that's about to become, friend. As the infection progresses, the Marine starts to literally fuse with his war gear. Picture cleaning your bolter one day and noticing your fingertips are stuck to the grip. No, actually merging with it. Panic sets in as you realize you can't drop your weapon. It's now part of you. Soon you're growing guns out of your flesh. That favored plasma pistol? It sinks into your forearm and your flesh just envelops it. Moments later, you can project plasma blasts from your palm as if your arm was the pistol. Sounds like a cool superpower? Maybe for a hot minute, until it goes further. Your power armor, designed to be a second skin, truly becomes your skin. The virus ensures you and your armor meld inseparably. You wanted full integration with your gear. Congratulations, you're literally stuck in your armor for life now. Hope it's comfy. By mid-stage infection, your flesh and metal are a single, seamless entity. Your silhouette bulks out, not with healthy muscle, but with bulging metal-laced tumors where guns are forming. Joints reconfigure. Your gait becomes a lumbering stomp under the weight of new growth. Plates of armor meld to bone, reinforcing it as your body anticipates supporting heavy weaponry. You sprout extraneous mechanical limbs or ports. Ammunition feeds and power cables snake through your veins. You are turning into an organic weapon factory. As the final stages hit, you're barely recognizable as human. You've become what's known in hushed tones as an obliterator, or a close combat-centric variant called a mutilator. Your entire epidermis is now a swirling mass of flesh metal, constantly warping and reconfiguring. With a thought, if your mind is still intact enough for coherent thought, you can extrude a barrel here, a sword blade there. Guns, blades, flamethrowers, missile launchers, they grow from your grotesque form like horrifying fruits on a blighted tree. You can literally pull weapons out of your own body or reshape your limbs into them. If this sounds a bit like a comic book villain's power, remember, in 40K it comes with a huge cost. Your humanity is gone. Most obliterators' minds go haywire from the transformation. They exist in a near-ecstatic state of communion with weapons caring only for destruction. They crave war like a drug, because in battle they can let their curse run rampant, spawning guns and blasting away, temporarily sating the insatiable urge the virus has imprinted in their psyche. The urge to merge with more technology, to consume weapons, to dominate and exterminate. Yes, consume weapons. An obliterator's idea of a buffet is a pile of armaments. They can absorb new weapons into their body to learn them and manifest their features later. See an obliterator pick up a fanciless cannon? He absorbs it into his amorphous arm, flesh metal rippling, and from then on, he can spew las beams from his chest at will. It's like demonic 3D printing, only you're the printer and also a nightmare. The Obliterator Virus is contagious in a sense. Prolonged contact with an obliterator can infect others, especially if you touch the fleshy metal tendrils or get sprayed by whatever passes for their blood. The Iron Warriors Chaos Legion, notorious tech heads that they are, saw potential in this and intentionally spread the virus among select troops to bolster their heavy support. Imagine being hand-picked. You, soldier, are being elevated to a mighty obliterator. Drink this broth of machine fluids and demon ichor. Some might volunteer, thinking it beats being a mere human. But those who've watched an obliterator in action, watched the tortured shifting of its form and the dull madness in whatever eyes it has left, know that this so-called boon is a curse to the core. Even the Tyranids, the galaxy's apex biological predators, aren't safe. There are reports that during the 13th Black Crusade, the virus was unleashed on a Tyranid bioship, turning parts of that living vessel into a half-mechanical, unresponsive mess severed from the hive mind. The Obliterator Virus doesn't care what you are. If you have biology and you love technology, boom, it will rewrite you. For the Imperium, encountering Obliterators is the stuff of horror vids. The Grey Knights, demon-hunting space marines, recorded that when they fought Obliterators, the damn things withstood absurd punishment. Bolter shells plunked into flesh that rang like steel, barely phasing them. An Obliterator would lurch, then literally grow a new gun and return fire. Cutting them down takes heavy firepower or dedicated heroes in melee, risking being diced by an enemy that can sprout chain blades from every pore. It's not pretty. Picture the aftermath of a battle where Obliterators took part. The field is littered with bizarre statues of meat and metal, the remains of Obliterators who finally got taken out. Some might still be alive, twitching, half their torso blown away, but weird cables flailing from the stump. It's nightmare fuel for any sane person. One can imagine an unlucky guardsman approaching, only for the corpse to gurgle and fire a last flesh-grown stubber from what used to be a ribcage. Emperor preserve us. In sum, the Obliterator Virus is a curse of transformation. Unlike Nurgle's rot, which melts you into goo, this one forges you into a grotesque amalgam of man, machine, and demon. It's the fate of those who maybe once loved their weapons a little too much, and in the end became what they loved. In the most monkey's paw, be careful what you wish for fashion. If you ever think, gee, I'd like to be one with my gun, remember the Obliterators, and maybe rephrase that wish. The Flesh Change and the Rubric of Ahriman, Curses of the Thousand Suns. Let's shift our attention to the tragic saga of the Thousand Suns, a space marine legion whose pursuit of knowledge and psychic power came with a terrible price. The story of their curses is a two-parter. First, a genetic mystical ailment known as the Flesh Change, and second, a sorceress solution that itself became an infamous curse, the Rubric of Ahriman. Together, these make for one of the most haunting chapters in 40K lore, a true monkey's paw tale of unintended consequences. The Flesh Change. Imagine being a warrior mystic, one of the Emperor's elite marines, but you carry a ticking time bomb in your gene seed. Without warning, you could start to mutate uncontrollably, your flesh warping into hideous new forms, your mind disintegrating as your body does. This was the Flesh Change, a curse rooted in the Thousand Suns' very genetic makeup. It turns out their Primarch, Magnus the Red, had an inherent flaw, some say due to his rampant psychic nature, that passed to his sons. From time to time, a Thousand Suns Marine would succumb to this affliction, limbs splitting into flailing tentacles, faces melting or sprouting new eyes and mouths, entire bodies morphing into unspeakable lumps of flesh that might grow claws, wings, or worse. Essentially, they'd turn into chaos spawn-like creatures, mindless, monstrous, and had to be swiftly killed by their comrades before they hurt others. Imagine the horror within the Legion. One minute, you're debating esoteric lore with Brother Argo. The next, he's screaming as two extra torsos burst out of his original one, and each starts howling in a different demonic voice. Not exactly good for morale. The Thousand Suns desperately sought a cure, or at least a containment for the Flesh Change. Enter Magnus himself, a psyker of godlike power, who by sheer will and sorcery staved off the curse for a time. He kept the Flesh Change in check, mostly, through complicated rituals and perhaps a deal or two with powers best left alone. Zinch. For a while, it seemed the flesh change was averted, and the Thousand Sons grew mighty in knowledge, though whispers say they courted damnation with their sorcery. Eventually, they paid the price when the Space Wolves and the Emperor's Wrath came knocking. Their homeworld Prospero was burned, and the Legion was driven into the Eye of Terror. Now, inside the Eye of Terror, a region literally made of psychic, chaotic energy, the flesh change came roaring back worse than ever. The survivors of Prospero, now outright chaos worshippers under Magnus's demon Primarch leadership, found their old curse reasserting itself full force in the warp's embrace. What a cruel joke. The very refuge they fled to aggravated their inner flaw. Marines were popping into gibbering mutants left and right. Ahriman, the chief librarian of the Legion, so basically the head wizard, couldn't stand it. He loved his Legion, his brothers. Seeing them devolve into mindless spawn broke him. So he hatched a plan, perhaps one of the most ambitious spells ever attempted by a mortal, well, a superhuman mind. This spell would stop the flesh change forever. Bold claim, right? Ahriman gathered a cabal of his most powerful sorcerers and dove into the forbidden pages of the Book of Magnus, accumulating every scrap of arcane knowledge needed to craft a spell of monumental power. When he set it off, the warp itself shuddered. All across the Thousand Sons Legion, a sweeping change occurred. The rampant mutations were halted instantly. Success. Kind of. See, Ahriman definitely ended the flesh change. The twist? His spell, henceforth called the Rubric of Ahriman, had a side effect. Every Thousand Sons Space Marine who wasn't a psyker, i.e., the majority of their legion, since only some had strong psychic ability, was turned to dust, literally. Their bodies disintegrated, crumbling into fine ashes inside their power armor, and their souls were sealed to that armor. They became the Rubric Marines, essentially unliving automatons. Each is just an empty suit of armor now, animated by residual soul and bound by sorcery. They can fight on, follow orders, even shoot guns and march into battle, but they are mindless and incapable of growth or change. They're like enchanted suits of armor containing a spirit, or as the Space Wolves rudely call them, dust collectors. Imagine that moment. Thousands of battle brothers who had survived Prospero and the horrors of the warp, suddenly collapsing into piles of armor and sand. The few psyker Thousand Sons, Ahriman among them, stood amidst silent rows of their former comrades. They had saved them from mutation, sure, by effectively killing them in all but the most literal sense. Only those with sufficient psychic power survived with their bodies intact. But even they were changed. The rubric granted these surviving sorcerers a boon of sorts, greatly strengthening their magical powers and rendering them resistant to the warping influence of chaos. No more spontaneous tentacles for these guys. They became paradoxically stable in form, able to wander the warp without turning into jello. But ask Ahriman, was it worth the cost? The Legion was broken. Where once he had an army of fellow scholars and warriors, now he had an army of silent, faceless automata that responded to his psychic commands but could no longer crack a joke or share a thought. The tragedy is immense. In trying to save his brothers from damnation, Ahriman condemned most of them to a fate of eternal servitude as unliving puppets. It's a classic 40,000 curse, one problem solved by creating another. Magnus the Red was furious with Ahriman for this spell, by the way. Daddy Dearest, now a demon primarch, essentially banished Ahriman for screwing up the Legion. Magnus's perspective, better some mutated maniacs than losing 90% of your Legion to Dust Bowl duty. Ahriman himself had very mixed feelings. He achieved a cold logic victory, but at an unthinkable moral cost. The Rubric of Ahriman is infamous now. Even 10,000 years later, Ahriman, who is still kicking around, one of the most powerful sorcerers ever, is obsessed with trying to undo or improve upon it. There are stories of him seeking artifacts and spells to maybe restore the Rubric Marines, to give them true life again. So far, no luck. The dust remains dust. So there you have it. The Thousand Sons were cursed first by their genes, then by their cure. The flesh change took their bodies. The Rubric saved those bodies by taking their souls instead, or at least their minds. Today, if you encounter the Thousand Sons on the battlefield, you'll see eerie ranks of ornate ancient power armor marching in eerie unison, each Rubric Marine an empty shell guided by a sorcerer's will. Shoot them full of holes, they just keep coming because, well, you can't kill what's already dead or what's never really alive in the first place. They're effectively immortal until their armor is utterly destroyed, and even then, their soul essence likely just whooshes back to the warp to maybe be reensconced later. It's horrifying when you pause to consider. These were once proud space marines, transhuman warriors with personalities, ambitions, camaraderie. Now they're literally walking suits of dust, and the ones who remain self-aware carry the heavy knowledge that they did this to their brothers. The Thousand Sons story is a tale of unintended consequences, a true double-edged curse. It shows in 40,000 that sometimes the cure is as bad as, or worse than, the disease. And in grimdark fashion, it also demonstrates that when you dabble in forces beyond your control, you often pay a price. The road to hell, or to Tzeentch's crystal labyrinth, is paved with good intentions and covered in the ashes of your former friends. The Red Thirst, Blood of the Angel. Now, lest you think only chaos-touched or gene-flawed individuals suffer curses, let's turn to one of the most storied loyalist factions, the Blood Angels Space Marines. Glorious, golden, artistic, noble. These guys are exemplars of the Emperor's ideals in many ways. But oh boy, do they have skeletons in their closet, or rather in their bloodstreams. The Blood Angels are cursed with not one but two infamous flaws. The first is called the Red Thirst, and it is essentially a vampiric bloodlust woven into their very DNA. Imagine being a warrior monk who values discipline and nobility, but inside you there's a gnawing hunger that grows with every battle, a craving for blood, for the visceral thrill of close combat, a barely containable urge to tear enemies limb from limb and drink in their lifeblood. That's what every Blood Angel, and indeed any descendant chapter of theirs, carries within. They feel a constant tug towards savagery, as if some beast lurks under their skin, scratching to get out. In battle, especially, the Red Thirst asserts itself. Their vision can redden, their canines lengthen, a ravenous thirst for the blood of the foe rises in their throats. They have to exercise immense self-control not to fall into a frenzy. Where did this come from? It's a legacy of their primarch, Sanguinius. Now, Sanguinius was a saintly figure by all accounts, but even he had a dark side. Legends say he too felt a thirst for blood in battle and had to master it. When he was slain at the Horus heresy at the hands of Horus himself, something imprinted onto his genetic legacy. The Blood Angels thereafter inherited a seed of his final rage and pain. We'll get to that in the next section, the Black Rage. But along with it came this red thirst, possibly a reflection of the other aspect of Sanguinius's nature, the predator within the angel. For most Blood Angels, the red thirst is a shadow they keep chained. They hold it at bay through meditation, art, brotherhood, and sheer will. They're famous for their refinement. Many are painters, sculptors, poets, which is perhaps how they cope. They channel that dark urge into creative expression rather than bloodletting as much as possible. But no one can hold it off forever. On the eve of battle, chaplains inspect the brethren for signs of the thirst gaining too much hold. In the heat of a prolonged campaign, some blood angels start to lose themselves. They get excessively aggressive. Their humor turns macabre. Maybe you catch Brother Antonius licking his fangs after cracking open an orc's skull a bit too eagerly. That's when you know the red thirst is breaking chains. If a blood angel succumbs, he might literally go into a mad frenzy where friend and foe blur. There are tales of blood angels, or their successor chapters, completely losing it and committing atrocities in the throes of the thirst. One moment, noble hero, the next a ravening monster who might drink the blood of civilians once the enemies are gone. It's not pretty. Those who survive such an episode will be racked with shame, if they can even recover their senses. The Death Company concept in the Blood Angels is a related thing, though more tied to the Black Rage, coming in a moment. But Blood Angels who feel the thirst or other curse overtaking them often voluntarily join these doomed units to seek an honorable death in battle before they fall completely from grace. Better to die killing the Emperor's foes than to live and possibly harm the innocent in their eyes. Interestingly, some successor chapters have even more trouble with the thirst. The Flesh Terrors, for example, are a Blood Angel successor for whom the polite word is savage. They basically can barely hold it together. Many Flesh Tearers have outright given into the thirst in battle and are known for, shall we say, overdoing the carnage. There are dark rumors of them massacring allies because they just couldn't stop. Gabriel Seth, their chapter master, struggles with it mightily and is brutally honest about it in some lore. He knows his chapter is on a slow path to damnation if the flaw is not solved. Then there are chapters like the Blood Drinkers, not subtle, that name, who apparently ritualize the thirst by literally drinking blood, from willing serfs or whatnot, in controlled ways, as a method to stave off uncontrollable urges. Practical, if morbid. And then you have anomalies like the Lamenters. The poor Lamenters whom we'll talk about separately. They believe themselves free of the curse. Somehow their gene seed seems to have muted it, only to get arguably a worse luck curse in exchange. The Blood Angels, though, have never rid themselves of the red thirst. They keep it secret from the wider Imperium as best they can, worried, probably correctly, that if, say, the Inquisition thought the Blood Angels were all potential vampires, there'd be some unpleasant purges, or at least distrust that could hamper them. To outsiders, hints of the red thirst are terrifying. Imagine Imperial Guardsmen fighting alongside Blood Angels. They admire these angelic warriors, until they see one at battle's end, helmet removed, with gore all over his face, literally drinking from the neck wound of a fallen enemy. That guardsman is going to need a therapist, and probably won't get one in the Guard. The official line is that Blood Angels are heroic and angelic. The reality in the trenches can be far more gothic and gory. At its core, the red thirst is a genetic curse, a flaw ingrained in one of the Emperor's finest legions. It calls into question the perfection of even the Angels of War. The Blood Angels struggle daily with it. It's the whisper in their ear, the itch they can't scratch. And because it's tied to blood and survival instincts, it's deeply psychological too. The metaphor is not subtle. They are both angels and vampires, saintly and damned all at once. Will there ever be a cure? Unlikely. 10,000 years and none found. The Blood Angels, instead, choose to see it as a test of their virtue, a trial that makes them stronger if overcome. But in their private moments, each Blood Angel must wonder if, one day, he'll be the one to snap. It's a personal curse, one carried alone in the silence of one's soul. And when war comes and the halls echo with bolter fire and death cries, That's when the thirst howls loudest in their hearts. So the next time you see a glorious golden space marine with angel wings painted on his armor, reciting poetry, remember, under that refined exterior, he's fighting a brutal inner war against a curse that wants to turn him into a predatory fiend. In the grim darkness of the far future, even the angels carry a touch of the monster within. The Black Rage. Visions of a dead angel. Tied intimately to the red thirst, yet distinct and even more terrifying in some ways, is the Black Rage. If the red thirst is a simmering hunger, the Black Rage is a full boil-over of trauma and fury. This curse doesn't afflict all blood angels, only some, seemingly at random, though often in the midst of or just prior to battle. Those it touches are never the same again. They are overwhelmed by a living nightmare, the final memories of their Primarch Sanguinius. Let's set the scene. 10,000 years ago, Sanguinius heroically faced Horus, the arch-traitor, aboard the War Master's battle barge during the Siege of Terra. Sanguinius fought like a true angel, but Horus was empowered by chaos, and tragically, Sanguinius was slain after a titanic struggle. But Sanguinius was also a powerful psychic being, and the trauma of his death, the righteous anger, and sorrow and pain of that moment left a kind of psycho-psychic imprint on his bloodline. The Blood Angels, through their gene seed, carry the echo of Sanguinius's last moments in their very souls. Usually it's dormant, but sometimes it rises to the surface. A blood angel succumbing to the Black Rage experiences a sudden, irreversible break with reality. In his mind, he becomes Sanguinius, or rather, he believes he is. Specifically, he thinks he is Sanguinius during the Battle of Terra, in those final hours. The afflicted Marine is transported by vision into the ultimate nightmare. He sees traitor Marines all around him, even if in reality they might be his loyal battle brothers or random bystanders. He sees Terra in flames, hears the echoes of that fateful battle. Most of all, he senses the presence of Horus, the arch-enemy, the hated foe, the one who must die even at the cost of everything. The Marine in Black Rage roars out Sanguinius's wrath and grief, often literally crying out for the Emperor or shouting Horus's name in challenge. Physically, how does this manifest? The Marine's demeanor completely changes, calm discipline replaced by unfettered rage and anguish. They often froth at the mouth, eyes wild, some say even literally turning red with blood. They attack with absolutely no regard for their own life or pain. Their strength seems to amplify, perhaps psychosomatically, or maybe the gene flaw has some adrenal overdrive element. They will attempt to tear apart anyone or anything that they perceive as the enemy, which, in their hallucination-fueled state, could be actual enemies. Great, they make fearsome fighters, or unfortunate allies who got too close. Not so great. There are accounts of battlefields where blood angels in the grip of Black Rage had to be physically restrained or knocked out after the fight because they'd start brutally executing enemy corpses or even attacking walls, still lost in their vision. They feel the pain of Sanguinius's broken body, the rage at Horus, the desperate need to save the Emperor. Essentially, they're reliving the worst moment in their Legion's history on loop, and it drives them insane. The Blood Angels have developed a tragic but effective protocol for this. Those who fall to the Black Rage are inducted into the Death Company. These Marines, now little more than living weapons awaiting a heroic death, don special black armor adorned with red crosses, symbolizing Sanguinius's wounds. They are led into battle by chaplains whose duty is to direct their fury toward the enemy. A Death Company Marine is expected to die fighting, because there's no coming back. Only one case in all of lore managed to return from the Black Rage's clutches. Chaplain Lamartz retains some lucidity, but even he is technically still in Black Rage, holding on by a thread of faith. The Death Company is unleashed where the fighting is thickest, where a normal man would quail. But these guys want to be there. They think they're storming Horus's fortress or fighting to defend the Emperor. They tear foes apart with chainswords, bolt pistols blazing until ammo's gone, then swinging in with bare fists if need be. They make frightfully effective shock troops simply because they have zero self-preservation. They already consider themselves dead, martyred alongside their Primarch in spirit. This is a curse deeply woven into the chapter's lore. It's sometimes called the Flaw of Sanguinius, alongside the Red Thirst. For the Blood Angels, it's a source of shame and sorrow. Imagine being a Blood Angel captain and seeing one of your most promising young brothers suddenly fall to his knees, tearing at his helmet, screaming about Horus, eyes crazed. You know that brother is effectively gone. You must send him off with the Death Company to die because there's no cure. The Blood Angels perform solemn rituals for these damned brethren. They paint their armor black, give them one final absolution, then aim them like a living missile at the foe. After the battle, any that somehow still live, well, they usually don't, but if they did, they're too far gone to recover. They may be locked up or given the Emperor's mercy, a bullet to the head, in a quiet cell. The Blood Angels don't advertise that part, naturally. From the victim's perspective, the Black Rage is as horrifying as it gets. It's not a subtle transformation. It's a sudden and utter loss of self to a tidal wave of someone else's despair and wrath. It's like being possessed by the ghost of your Primarch. For however long they last, those Marines believe utterly that they are Sanguinius, doomed and enraged. In some ways, maybe it's a mercy that they don't truly comprehend their real situation. The true horror might be on the comrades who witness it, who see their battle brother become a raving madman, and then have to sing songs of his glorious sacrifice after, to make it all feel less awful. In 40,000 narrative, the Black Rage has led to some epic moments, Death Company dreadnoughts charging into greater demons, etc., because yes, they even strap some of these guys into dreadnoughts if they were venerable heroes. They'd rather have them die usefully in a giant armored sarcophagus than go to waste. It's heroic and tragic. It's a curse that turns its sufferers into arguably martyrs, living out the final passion play of their Primarch. From a metaphysical viewpoint, some wonder if Sanguinius's spirit is somehow bound to his sons in death, or if it's purely psychological. Knowing 40K, there's likely a warp component. The Blood Angels revere Sanguinius almost as a saint, and so that collective belief and the trauma imprinted in their genocide possibly manifests in the warp, occasionally overpowering individuals. The ruinous powers surely would love to twist that knife too. Khorne would cackle at a noble Blood Angel losing himself to berserker fury. Though note, Black Rage isn't a chaos possession. It's more a mental break/shadow of the past. To sum it up, the Black Rage is a curse that drags the Blood Angels, one of the most upright and honorable chapters, into the deepest pit of battlefield insanity and emotional anguish. It's horrifying not just for its physical effects, but for the emotional weight. It is literally the echo of a Primarch's death scream, reaching across millennia to shatter the minds of his sons. That's poetic and dark on a level that even chaos must give a slow clap for. And for the Blood Angels, it is a burden they endure with stoicism externally. But internally, every one of them knows that any day, with the next battle, it could be me who loses myself. To carry on despite that knowledge? That's courage. Tragic, cursed courage. The Lamenters, cursed by fate itself. When it comes to cursed fates, few can compete with the Lamenters. Let me introduce you to the unluckiest bunch of space marines to ever don power armor. The Lamenters are a chapter with a history so woeful that their very name has become synonymous with tragedy and misfortune. If curses can come in the form of pure bad luck, the Lamenters hit the jackpot. or rather the jack pocket full of snakes. The Lamenters were created during the notorious 21st Founding, also dubbed the Cursed Founding. More on that overall in a moment. They're descended from Blood Angel stock, but supposedly they were engineered to not carry the usual Blood Angel's flaws, the Red Thirst and Black Rage we just covered. Hey, that sounds like a blessing. Only it seems the universe, or the gene rights, or perhaps the dark gods having a giggle, decided to balance the scales in a cruel way. The Lamenters indeed showed remarkably low instances of Red Thirst/Black Rage, leading some to think they beat the Blood Angel's curse. But instead, they got saddled with the Curse of Calamitous Fortune. Not an official name, mind you, but ask anyone familiar with them. These guys have horrific luck. At first, maybe it wasn't obvious. They had the usual early chapter duties, likely some brushfire wars here and there. But as history rolled on, the Lamenters started to feature in one disaster after another. They always seemed to be in the wrong place at the wrong time, or making a noble choice that backfired spectacularly. During the event known as the Badab War, the Lamenters were one of the few chapters who sided with the rebel Astral Claws, led by Luft Huron. Now, the Lamenters weren't evil or traitorous per se. They believed, perhaps due to deception by Huron or just their own sense of misplaced duty, that they were on the right side, protecting fellow Astartes from what they perceived as imperial mismanagement. But oh boy, was that a mistake. When the dust settled, the Loyalists won. Huron became Huron Blackheart, a chaos pirate. And the Lamenters? They were utterly shattered. They fought valiantly even in defeat, nearly breaking the Loyalist Minotaurs chapter in one engagement. But ultimately they surrendered. As punishment atonement, any surviving Lamenters were sent on a penitent crusade, basically a 100-year suicide mission mandate to go do some good and hopefully die for the Emperor to redeem themselves. A cursed chapter on a penitent crusade. What could go wrong? How about nearly getting wiped out by Tyranids? Yes, not long into this crusade, the Lamenters ran smack into Hive Fleet Kraken, one of the galaxy's nastier Tyrannid invasions. The records of the Battle of Malvolian are heartbreaking. The Lamenters fought desperately to evacuate civilians from a doomed world being devoured by bugs. They held off swarms of Tyranids, saving many lives, but at a terrible cost. By the time relief arrived, the Lamenters had been reduced to, depending on the source, around 300 Marines, from a chapter that should have approximately 1,000. Ouch! But they survived. A lot of chapters might have been completely annihilated, but these stubborn, tragic heroes lived on, battered and at a fraction of their strength. So, after being nearly eliminated in that Xenos war, the Lamenters kind of vanish for a bit to lick their wounds, those few left. The Imperium eventually lists them as a crusading chapter, whereabouts unknown, presumed still doing their penitent thing. Then, during the later stages of the Indomitus era, post-Horus heresy timeline advancing, some Lamenters show up aiding their parent chapter, the Blood Angels, against Hive Fleet Leviathan. Tyranids again, near Baal. They have like 4 dreadnoughts and a couple dozen Marines left at that point, basically a company's worth, if that. The Blood Angels are shocked to see them and basically go, "Emperor's tears. What happened to you guys?" The Lamenters, true to form, probably just sighed heavily under their helmets. It's not just the big wars. Even little stories about Lamenters have this grim tinge. There's a running gag that if the Lamenters show up to help you, you're about to be knee-deep in tragedy. Like a PDF commander might cheer, "Reinforcements are here, the Lamenters," and his veteran adjutant just slowly shakes his head, knowing that only really bad situations seem to attract these guys. Yet, to their eternal credit, the Lamenters never stopped trying to do the right thing. They exemplify the heroic martyr vibe of the Blood Angels lineage, even as fate spits in their face. Their chapter symbol is a bleeding heart. How appropriate is that? It's literally a heart with a drop of blood, some say a teardrop. Sorrow and suffering made heraldry. Is their luck curse real, or just perception? Well, in a galaxy where chaos gods are real and fate can be an active force, who's to say some malign influence isn't literally dogging their steps? Perhaps Tzeentch, the trickster, cursed them with misfortune for giggles. Or maybe some defect in their gene seed, by trying to remove the flaw, introduced some metaphysical Murphy's Law. The Imperium doesn't officially recognize luck as a curse, but the evidence is plain. Other cursed founding chapters had obvious physical or mental mutations. The Lamenters appear outwardly fine, but their curse is circumstance itself. To give an analogy, if a normal Space Marine chapter is a weighted die that lands on success often, the Lamenters are a die that somehow finds a way to land on the one face that means disaster, against all probability. If there's a trap, they step in it. If there's a virus, they catch it. If an enemy is going to blindside someone, it'll blindside them. And yet, in spite of that, they endure, which in a twisted way makes them admirable. They've had every reason to give up hope, to go renegade or fall to despair. Nurgle would love if they just said, "Screw it, give us your embrace." And indeed, it's a minor miracle they didn't succumb to chaos, given all their misfortune. But the Lamenters keep their faith. Perhaps that's the ultimate test. In narrative terms, the Lamenters Curse might eventually break. Who knows, maybe Guilliman, the returned Primarch in current lore, will pity them and fold them into some rebuild effort, or reinforcements via new Primaris Marines might bolster them. But with their luck, the ship carrying their Primaris reinforcements would probably blow up in the warp or something. The Lamenters stand as a testament that, in Warhammer 40K, curses aren't just for the obviously hexed. Sometimes it's an underdog story turned up to 11 on the tragedy dial. If you ever feel like the universe is out to get you, the Lamenters would like a word over a very large cup of Amasec. They truly are cursed by fate, and they have every right to lament. Other cursed founding souls, flames, bones, and ghosts. Speaking of the cursed 21st founding, the Lamenters weren't the only unlucky offspring from that ill-fated experiment by the Adeptus Mechanicus and the Administratum to create better Space Marines. A bunch of chapters from that founding developed weird mutations or fates, earning the whole batch the nickname Cursed Founding. Let's briefly unmask a few of these horrors. The Flame Falcons. Ever heard the phrase, "set yourself on fire to keep others warm"? The Flame Falcons took that a bit too literally. During a campaign against heretics, witnesses say the Flame Falcons' battle brothers suddenly burst into supernatural flame. Their bodies were wreathed in fire that didn't harm them, but did fry anybody nearby. On the bright side, pun intended, it freaked out the enemy and gave the Falcons a decisive victory. On the not-so-bright side, the Inquisition took one look and said, "Mutation, possibly chaos taint," and promptly declared the whole chapter excommunicate. In typical inquisitorial fashion, they launched a purge. We don't have details, but presumably many Flame Falcons were killed by this overreaction. A rumor persists, though. Some Flame Falcons might have escaped the purge. Some whisper they could have become something even stranger, the Legion of the Damned. I'll get to those mysterious dudes in a second. It's just speculation, but the idea is that maybe the Flame Falcon's spontaneous combustion wasn't chaos, but some weird warp phenomenon that the Emperor, or some benevolent force, allowed to persist, turning them into ghostly fire spirits of vengeance. True or not, the Flame Falcon's case is a classic cursed founding story. try to improve Marines, end up with living torches that get mistaken for demons. The Black Dragons. If you're familiar with Marvel's Wolverine, imagine a whole squad of Wolverines whose claws are made of bone and can cut through tank armor. That's the Black Dragons in a nutshell. Their gene seed mutation causes some of them to grow bony crests or spikes, particularly on the forearms and heads. These bones can grow out like blades. The Black Dragons don't see this as a curse at all. They straight up weaponize it. They sharpen and plate these bone protrusions with adamantium and use them in melee to eviscerate foes. Pretty badass, right? Except the Inquisition once again was like, hold up, that's mutation. Mutation is heresy. There was even something called the Bone Purge, where people tried to censure the chapter. But interestingly, the Black Dragons have survived. They more or less told the Inquisition, this is our gene seed, we're still loyal, and we use our mutation to kill the Emperor's enemies. Deal with it. And apparently the Imperium has mostly dealt with it, albeit while watching them carefully. So the Black Dragons are cursed physically, but they've made it into a strength. Still, one imagines the individual Marines had, mixed feelings the first time they found a 12-inch spike growing out of their elbow. Brother Haneth, could you hand me that file? The elbow spurs back again. The Sons of Antaeus. A less flashy curse, these guys were reportedly abnormally large and extremely tough, like a throwback to the old myth of Antaeus, who drew strength from the earth. Rumors hint that maybe some forbidden tampering, like splicing in traitor Legion gene seed, such as the Death Guard's hardiness, could have been at play. The result? Marines that are maybe even stronger and hardier than typical. Not a bad mutation to have, right? The Sons of Antaeus kept things on the down low. Not much public info, which suggests they didn't suffer obvious physical deformities. But their status as cursed founding means they probably carried some stigma or hidden issue. Maybe their metabolism was so slow they had trouble interfacing with standard equipment, or their minds dulled. Who knows? They're kind of mysterious. They might still be around in some capacity. The Firehawks, Legion of the Damned. Now, here's a spooky one. The Firehawks were not technically part of the 21st founding, they were earlier, but their fate turned them into what we now call the Legion of the Damned, which is certainly curse-adjacent. The Firehawks chapter disappeared in warp space in the late 41st millennium, lost entirely. Later on, sightings began of strange space marines in black armor with flames and bone motifs who would appear out of nowhere in the direst moments to aid Imperial forces. These mysterious marines seemed ghostly, their armor burning with ethereal flame, their demeanor silent and otherworldly. After decimating the enemy and saving the day, they'd vanish without a trace. The Imperium labeled them the Legion of the Damned and has kind of thrown up its hands like, well, they seem to be on our side, so okay. Many believe the Legion of the Damned are indeed the spectral remnants of the Firehawks, cursed to roam the warp and only able to manifest briefly to fight. If true, what a fate. To be trapped in a state of half-existence, your very bodies lit with unearthly fire, only material enough to kill and then fading like smoke. They don't communicate except maybe a psychic whisper here or there. Are they in constant pain? Are they even alive in any normal sense? Possibly not. They might be like warp ghosts, sustained by faith or by a mission to forever fight for the Emperor. That's a noble-sounding end, but also a cursed existence. Eternal war with no rest, literally becoming the damned. If not for their righteous actions, one could mistake them for a host of chaos specters. But all accounts suggest they protect the innocent and strike down the impure, so if it's a curse, at least it's directed well. If I were a fire hawk and my reward for loyalty was to become a flaming skeleton wraith forever, I might be a little miffed. But such is the way of things in 40K. Others, there were chapters like the Tiger Claws, who some suspect were quietly folded into the Astral Claws and thus went renegade in Badab War. So that's a curse of pride and ambition, perhaps. The Minotaurs, genetically enhanced aggression and loyalty directly to High Lords, kind of the attack dogs of the Imperium. Not sure if curse or design, but they have a reputation for brutality and odd behavior. And the Blood Gorgons, from a novel, a chapter that fell to chaos, though that might have less to do with a curse and more with just succumbing to temptation. The theme is, the 21st founding attempted to fix problems in Astartes genocide, but resulted in side effects that ranged from unfortunate to catastrophic. It's almost as if meddling with the Emperor's work was hubris that invited divine or warp punishment. Hence, cursed. Most of these chapters ended up destroyed, exiled, or heavily scrutinized. Except a few who remain, like the Black Dragons and possibly the Sons of Antaeus, often living on the fringes of imperial acceptance. So curses in Warhammer 40K don't always look like a wizard casting a spell. Sometimes they look like a misguided scientific project that twists fate or biology in unpredictable ways. In the case of the cursed founding, it gave us living candles, bone-blade mutants, and misfortune-plagued knights, among others. Each a story of trying to push the limits and paying a price. Necron Flayed Curse, when the machines hunger for flesh. Thus far, humanish factions have dominated our cursed tour, but humans certainly haven't cornered the market on curses. Enter the Necrons, an ancient race of living metal skeletons who, one would think, are beyond such superstitions as curses. Yet, even these soulless Terminator-like beings suffer a profound horror among their kind. The Flayer Curse. Sometimes called the Flayer Virus, though it's really more of a necro-deranged contagion. It's a bane that turns cold, logical killing machines into flesh-obsessed lunatics. To truly appreciate the Flayer Curse, we need a bit of context. The Necrons weren't always machines. They were once the Necron Tyre, a flesh and blood species that had a pretty awful life. Short, painful, due to a harsh sun. They made a devil's bargain to gain immortality, transferring their minds into bodies of living metal, becoming the Necrons, ageless, tireless, but at the cost of their souls and much of their personality. They also had a big war with godlike beings called the Khatan. One particularly nasty Khatan was Landu Gor, the Flayer, who had a unique portfolio. It loved the taste of living flesh. Yes, a star god that was essentially a cosmic cannibal. The Necrons eventually betrayed and destroyed the Khatan, as whole beings anyway, because the Khartan had been using and consuming them. But when the Flayer was shattered, with its dying breath, it unleashed a terrible parting gift. A curse upon the Necrons, an echo of its own insatiable hunger for flesh. At first, nothing obvious happened. The Necrons went into hibernation for millions of years, only to start waking up in the 41st millennium. And then the whispers began. Isolated Necron warriors acting strangely. A Necron unit might continue firing on enemies long after they were dead, then wade in among the corpses and start tearing chunks off with their metal claws, smearing blood on themselves in a grotesque mockery of feasting. These reports multiplied. It became clear that some Necrons were contracting a mimetic virus, the Flayer Curse. It drives them murderously insane with a craving for the flesh and blood of the living. Picture it. Skeletal, mechanical figures, who normally are emotionless and efficient, suddenly devolve into cackling ghouls. They literally drape themselves in the skin of their victims, hanging flayed hides over their metallic limbs. They sharpen their fingers into claws, or have purpose-built flensing blades, and delight in butchering every organic thing they can catch. They try to eat the flesh, shoving meat into fang-toothed jaws or empty maws. It's utterly futile, of course. Necrons have no digestive system, no biological need for sustenance. The flesh just slops out or hangs there. But the cursed Necron doesn't understand that. It's compelled by a hunger it can never satisfy. How's that for horrifying? A machine cursed with the hallucination of hunger so powerful it overrides all logic. These are the Flayed Ones, as they're called by others. They often vanish from their dynasties. A Necron lord horrified by this behavior might banish or lock away afflicted warriors. But the Flayed Ones have this eerie way of disappearing into pocket dimensions, some parallel realm within the warp or something. They pop in and out of real space unpredictably. They tend to congregate in their own grisly sub-society, making charnel lairs decorated with piles of body parts, like some macabre art gallery. When Necrons go to war, sometimes without warning, packs of Flayed Ones will materialize on the battlefield, attracted by the prospect of slaughter. They don't coordinate with the normal Necron command structure. In fact, other Necrons consider them a dangerous nuisance. They simply appear, rip the enemy to bloody shreds, and disappear again. On one hand, they're effective terror troops. There are few things more panic-inducing for Imperial Guardsmen than seeing a dozen skeletal figures wearing the faces of their dead comrades like cloaks. But on the other hand, their presence risks spreading the curse to others. Some Necron mechanics suspect the curse can propagate. Maybe witnessing the carnage or some contact triggers dormant code in others and drives them mad too. Necron cryptechs, their science magic technologists, and overlords have tried to study or cure this affliction, but it's in the very code from the Flayer's curse. It's not well understood, and most Necron nobility would rather just keep it hush-hush. It's a bit of a dirty secret that these proud immortal beings have a segment of their population that's basically gone full undead cannibal. They fear and hate it. There's a dynasty, for instance, known as the Maynarch dynasty, that had a high incidence of the Flayer curse. They became pariahs among Necrons because they embraced the gore-crazed ways, worshipping an echo of the Flayer Catan. Other Necrons teamed up to exterminate the afflicted dynasty like putting down rabid animals. From a horror standpoint, the Flayer curse is one of the most visually ghastly curses in 40K. You have the Terminator-like being, implacable, unnatural, suddenly donning dripping human skin and capering towards you. Yes, I said capering. Flayed Ones often move with a disturbing gait, sometimes described as scampering or crawling in a jerky, unnatural way, like a skeletal insect. They may even let out distorted, grating laughs. Imagine metal vocalizers trying to emulate a laugh remembered from when they were alive millions of years ago. Nightmare fuel. And all the while, they're compelled to rend you because some part of them misses the feeling of flesh, of life, of all that they sacrificed. There's a tragic underpinning. Perhaps on some deep level, the Necron suffers the Flayer curse because of the cosmic horror of their condition. Having forsaken flesh and life, some go mad yearning to feel it again. It's like the curse exploits their suppressed guilt or longing, twisting it into homicidal mania. So here we have the Necrons, supposedly emotionless, with a subset that is the exact opposite. All id, no superego, just base animalistic bloodthirst. If that's not a curse, I don't know what is. There's no benefit, no upside. The Flayed Ones don't become stronger Necrons or anything. They're just insane. It's a curse of pure spite from a dying star god. Basically, if I can't eat, you'll forever starve. A poetic vengeance by the Flayer on its conquerors. Encountering a Flayed One pack is often short and brutal for human forces. These things excel at infiltration and close combat slaughter. One second your auspex is clear, the next they've phased in all around you, cutting, slicing, and painting the room red with your squad mates. Survivors sometimes aren't killed outright. They might be left to watch in horror as these ghouls wear the entrails of their friends. That kind of psychological damage is huge. How do you fight an enemy that literally wears your buddy's face on its chest and giggles in static? You don't, at least not without losing a piece of your sanity. Thus, the Flayer curse stands out as a prime example of a Xenos curse, something not born of human magic or demonic pact, but of an alien madness, yet thoroughly as cursed as any Nurgle's plague or chaos hex. It shows that in Warhammer 40K, even the cold logic of the machine can be subverted by a curse, turning order into chaos, discipline into depravity. The Necrons thought they were rid of all the weaknesses of flesh. Instead, some of them got the worst of both worlds, the body of a machine with the sick appetites of a flesh fiend. Now that's a curse to make even unfeeling robots shudder. The Necrons' price of immortality, a race cursed by their gods. We can't talk about Necron curses without acknowledging the overarching tragic curse of their entire species. Long before the Flayer madness, the Necrontyr made a desperate bargain that granted them immortality but arguably cursed their entire civilization. While not a curse in the classic magic sense, it's a doom every bit as horrifying in its outcome as anything we've discussed. The Necrontyr were mortal, frail, and bitter about it. Along come the Khitan, godlike star vampires, who offered them a deal: biotransference. Give up your weak flesh and we'll put you in bodies of living metal. You'll never fall ill, never age, basically live forever and be super durable to boot. Sign us up, said the Necrontyr leadership, especially their ruler, the Silent King Zarek, who saw this as a way to unite his fractious people and stick it to their ancient enemies, the Old Ones. The biotransference process was done. Necrontyr were marched into great bioforges and emerged as Necrons. Sure enough, they got shiny new immortal bodies, but in the process their souls were stripped away and feasted upon by the Khitan. The Necrons had been enslaved. They got immortality, yes, but at the cost of their essence and free will. Most became mindless or near-mindless soldiers bound to obey. Only a few retained their intellect. The ruling elite, overlords, cryptex, etc., had a measure of self left. So the Necron curse. They cannot die natural deaths. They live in unfeeling metal shells, and many can't even appreciate their immortality because they lack the consciousness to do so. Those who do remain aware, like overlords, often have to grapple with millions of years of ennui and regret. The Silent King himself realized, too late, the horror of what he had done to his people. They had escaped the curse of flesh, only to be cursed with eternal unliving stagnation. The Silent King ultimately led a rebellion to shatter the Khitan, which succeeded, albeit the Khitan shards remain. And then he sent the Necrons into hibernation, hoping time would heal the galaxy until a day they could rise again and rebuild. But as they awaken, some are waking up insane or with deteriorated protocols. Others find a galaxy changed and full of younger races. They have to face a new reality. And some, like Imhotep, the Storm Lord, just go full conqueror mode to reassert purpose. Others, like Trazeen the Infinite, basically become obsessive collectors to occupy their endless time, and some undoubtedly wrestle with deep existential despair. Immortality, it turns out, isn't all it's cracked up to be when you've lost your soul and everything that made life worth living. We see the pathos in characters like Orikan the Diviner or Nemesor Zandrek. Zandrek, for example, is effectively Alzheimer's ridden. his mind stuck in memories of the past, thinking enemy commanders are just rival nobles and not recognizing that things have changed. A comedic but also pitiable curse. He's immortal, but his mind is deteriorating in loops of old glories. His loyal bodyguard pretends nothing's wrong, indulging his delusions, which is oddly touching but also sad. Another example. Necron lords sometimes have awakening personality drift. Some become crueler, others eccentric. Without souls, what exactly animates them? It's their consciousness imprinted on the machine, but arguably incomplete. That could be seen as a curse, like a high-functioning zombie that thinks it's still the person it was. But something's fundamentally missing. The common Necron warriors are basically automata now. Once living individuals with dreams and families, the Necron tier had families. They were a living race. Now reduced to clattering silent drones that just march and kill at command, with maybe a faint glimmer of a memory that occasionally surfaces like a half-remembered nightmare. There's lore describing a Necron warrior hesitating after killing an Imperial soldier, as if a flicker of remorse or shock went through its dim brain, some echo of its lost soul. Then it shakes it off and continues the fight. Heartbreaking, if you think about it. Thus, the curse of the Necrons is that in seeking immortality, they consigned themselves to a fate of unliving servitude. They achieved what many humans dream of: no death. But at the dire cost of everything that made life meaningful. If that's not a monkey's paw curse on a civilization-wide scale, I don't know what is. It evokes that very 40,000 idea. Even the winners, they beat their gods, they outlived their foes, are haunted by tragedy. Sure, a Necron overlord might shrug and say, "Curses, that's feeble human talk. We are beyond such things." But deep in their databanks, maybe a vestige of their Necron-tire self is silently screaming for the flesh and blood life it lost eons ago. They might occasionally even envy the mortals they fight. How ironic is that? The Necron looks at a dying guardsman who's afraid and alive and feels a pang of something. Jealousy? Sadness? Then it passes and the cold logic returns, purge the lesser beings. That, to me, is one of the saddest curses in the setting. In some, the Necrons got the raw end of the deal. They were cursed by the Khatan's deceit, and although they broke those shackles, they can never regain what was taken. They're immortal, yet in a way trapped in a tomb forever, the tomb of their own undying bodies. They call themselves the Undying Ones with pride, but there's a reason their perspective is often called the Infinite and the Divine, after a novel title. They have infinity, but divinity, true life spark, escapes them. That's a curse beyond any spellbook, a slow-burn spiritual curse that no amount of Gauss flayers or conquest will lift. Eldar, a species damned by their own sin. The curse of Shah-Do Eth, Slaanesh's mark. Shifting focus to another ancient race, the Eldari. If any species exemplifies a self-inflicted curse, it's the Eldar. Their story is basically a cautionary tale, flying too close to the sun and birthing a catastrophe that doomed their souls for eternity. The Eldar's curse is named Slaanesh, the chaos god born from their empire's fall, who in one cataclysmic moment devoured most of their souls and continues to hunger for every Eldar soul ever after. Let's unpack that. The Eldar, long before humans had fire, had a galaxy-spanning civilization. They were insanely powerful psychers, living in a utopian, some might say decadent, society. Over millennia, they grew increasingly hedonistic, seeking new extremes of pleasure and sensation. Unbeknownst to them, their collective excess in the psychic realm was gestating an unspeakable being in the warp. Finally, their depravity reached critical mass. In an event called the Fall, that psychic buildup coalesced and birthed a new chaos god, Slaanesh, also called She Who Thirsts. The birth cry of Slaanesh was like a metaphysical supernova. It tore the heart out of the Eldar Empire, both literally, creating the Eye of Terror, a warp rift where their homeworlds were, and spiritually. In an instant, billions of Eldar cried out and were silenced, as Slaanesh sucked up their souls like a kid slurping a giant milkshake. Only those who were shielded or far away survived with souls intact, like on distant craftworld ships, or those who would become Dark Eldar hiding in the webway, etc. From that moment on, every single Eldar lives under a terrible shadow. When they die, if nothing special is done, their soul will be claimed by Slaanesh to be eternally consumed and tormented. Think about that. Humans in 40,000 have it bad enough with chaos, but at least theoretically the God Emperor might protect their soul, or it might dissipate. For an Eldar, there's a personalized demon waiting to gulp them down. Slaanesh exists because of them, and thus feels absolute ownership over their spirits. You can't negotiate with that. It's cosmic law now. They call this doom the Curse of Eldanesh in their mythology, or She Who Thirsts, always thirsting for them. So the Eldar are effectively a cursed people. They've adapted to this in a few ways. The craft world Eldari, the good, neutral-ish ones, have developed the use of spirit stones, psychoreceptive crystals they carry, which upon death will catch their soul before it escapes. Then they install these souls into the craft world's infinity circuit, a network that is like a world-spanning soul battery or collective afterlife, so the souls can exist in a relatively peaceful limbo, part of the craft world's gestalt, rather than getting devoured. It's not exactly heaven, more like being a spirit in a communal garden, but it's way better than Slaanesh's belly. As long as their soul is in a stone or the circuit, Slaanesh can't get it unless the stone is destroyed or something. This is why Eldar are fanatically protective of spirit stones. If a stone falls into an enemy's hands or is lost, that soul might eventually be doomed. The Drukuri, Dark Eldar, took a different approach. They reside in the Webway, an extra-dimensional labyrinth outside the warp, where Slaanesh's immediate reach is limited. However, they can't escape the curse entirely. Outside of real space, their souls start slowly being leached by Slaanesh anyway. They feel a spiritual attrition, a gradual withering. They found a twisted solution. By inflicting pain and suffering on others, especially in real space raids, they can absorb that agonizing energy to revitalize their souls. Essentially, they vampirize the pain of others to keep their own soul juicy, denying Slaanesh the chance to sip at them. This, of course, means they have to continuously torture, murder, and commit atrocities to fend off a worse fate. Talk about a wretched way to live, yet they've embraced it and even enjoy it. But if a Dark Eldar goes too long without causing suffering, they'll start to feel their soul dwindling, their vitality fading, and eventually they'd either have to go cause pain or succumb, and then Slaanesh will gulp their soul down in the end. So the Dark Eldar are in a perpetual race against damnation, inflicting hell on others to avoid their own. That's basically a form of curse. They must be evil to survive. From their perspective, the Exodite Eldar, those who left before the fall to live simpler lives on maiden worlds, have their own method. They have world spirits, like mini-infinity circuits within their planets, that they join in death. So similar to craftworlders with stones. The Harlequins are a special case. They made a pact with the Eldar laughing god, Segork, who protects their souls from Slaanesh in exchange for their eternal service, performing and guarding Eldar lore. There's even the recent development of the Inari, followers of Ennead, the Eldar god of the dead. They believe Ennead's birth, a nascent god formed of the Infinity Circuits, can defeat Slaanesh and free all Eldar souls. Ivrain, their prophetess, can actually pull Eldar souls back out of their spirit stones and resurrect them, somehow cheating Slaanesh momentarily. It's a whole thing, a potential salvation from the curse, but not certain and wrapped up in prophecy and risk. For an individual Eldar, living with this curse is intense. Think if you knew for a fact that if you die, a hell being will torture you forever. Eldar are often described as incredibly melancholic or fatalistic as a result. It's why they fight death so hard, why they cling to their traditions. It's also why their birth rate is low. Aside from narrative reasons, who wants to bring new kids into this curse? Some do, but it's rarer, and every birth is precious. It's also why Eldar who lose hope or become reckless can be extremely dangerous. The mindset might become, we're damned anyway, might as well go out in a blaze of glory. Many of their great heroes or villains, like Prince Iriel of Ayondin or even Eldred Ulthran, have a bit of fatalism guiding their bold actions. The curse of Slaanesh on the Eldar is a prime example of a racial curse. It shapes every aspect of their society. It's deeply tragic because they brought it on themselves, though current generation Eldar might feel it was our ancestors, not us, and we're stuck with it. It's akin to original sin in some ways, an inherited spiritual debt that must constantly be accounted for. Culturally, the Craftworld Eldar's strict lifestyle, following paths, warrior path, artisan path, etc., to discipline their minds, is in part to avoid excess, to never again birth a demon god, and to keep their souls and emotions in check. That regimented life is a direct response to the curse's cause. The Dark Eldar went the other extreme, doubling down on excess but cunningly channeling it to dodge the curse's consequence. Either way, everything they do revolves around this past sin and present curse. From a horror perspective, imagine an Eldar who's mortally wounded and knows they're about to die, but their spirit stone is shattered or lost. The sheer terror and despair they'd feel, knowing what's coming, is off the charts. Even the usually aloof Eldar would beg or scream at that moment. There's a short story in which an Eldar stone is lost, and a human, Imperial Guardsman, puts them out of their misery. The Eldar actually thanks the human because being killed before the soul can be eaten might give them a chance to slip away, or maybe not, but in the moment it felt like mercy. It's heavy stuff. So yes, the Eldar as a whole are living under arguably the biggest curse of all, the enmity of a god that hungers eternally for them. Until or unless Slaanesh is destroyed, which seems nearly impossible, though the Inari plotline hangs on that hope, they will always have this doom over them. It's a brilliant narrative element because it makes this advanced, superior race tragically flawed and desperate. Demon weapons and cursed artifacts. When possessions possess you. Thus far, we've covered genetic curses, diseases, cosmic ironies, and species-wide dooms. But let's not forget the classic cursed object trope, alive and well in 40K, in the form of demon weapons and dark artifacts. In a universe where literal demons are real, it stands to reason that some of them get bound into things. Swords, axes, guns, tomes, jewelry, you name it. Creating items of great power with nasty kickbacks for the user. Imagine stumbling upon an ancient sword on a war-torn world. Its blade seems to drink in the light. Strange runes glint along its fuller. You pick it up, and suddenly a voice whispers in your mind, oh so sweetly, promising you the strength to vanquish your foes. Would you use it? Many a hero or villain in 40K has said, yes, I will, only to later scream, "No, I shouldn't have." Take, for example, demon weapons wielded by Chaos champions. These can make a warrior a one-man army. A demon bound into a blade might grant it the ability to cut through any armor, or burst into unholy flame, or strike with the strength of a thunderbolt. But the demon isn't tame. It's bound, resentful, cunning. It whispers to its wielder, maybe giving them rage or bloodlust if it's a cornate demon, or twisting their perceptions if it's Tzi'tchian. Often, using a demon weapon requires a strong will. If the bearer shows weakness, the demon might take over or warp their body. There's a tale of a Chaos champion with a demon sword that, the moment the champion faltered in faith, the sword turned on him, his grip locked unwillingly as he slashed his own throat with it. Talk about a double cross! Or consider the Murder Sword, a Chaos artifact from the lore. It's a blade that, when a warrior dedicates a victim's true name to it, it becomes supernaturally lethal to that specific target. Pretty handy for assassinating a particular foe. But it's hinted that carrying such an artifact, whispering those names to it, is spiritually perilous. It likely demands blood constantly, maybe even friends or innocents, if no enemies are around, lest it thirsts for yours. The Black Mace is said to carry the curses of all the traitor Primarchs. Strike someone with it, and not only are they pulverized, but a shockwave of entropic curse energy spreads, potentially killing others in a radius. That power doesn't come free. A user might find his own limbs gradually turning necrotic, or his mind fouled by the collective hatred bound in the weapon. Then there's the story of Commissar Yarek's Bale Eye. Yarek took the claw of an orc warlord he killed, and the orc's eye as well. He uses the eye as a digital weapon that can fire a laser. Is it cursed? Maybe not in a chaos sense, but orcs believed Yarek evil and powerful for having it. If this were a myth, that eye could carry the orc's spite, and one day maybe influence him. It hasn't in canon. Yarek's will is iron, but it's an example where relics carry psychic weight. Tomes of forbidden lore are often straight-up cursed. The Necrotiuk drove people mad. The Book of Lorgar is basically the Chaos Bible that could corrupt a planet's faith. The Malus Codicium, a Chaos grimoire, was so nasty an Inquisitor traded his soul to destroy it. Reading these texts can summon demons inadvertently or twist the reader irreversibly. And of course, Chaos armor or trinkets. Maybe that cool spiky helmet gives you visions in battle to anticipate moves. Cinch's gift, but each time you use it, a bit of your sanity erodes until one day you're another babbling prophet chained in a warband's cage. Lest we think only Chaos makes cursed items, the Imperium has some too. They wouldn't call them cursed, but sometimes a holy relic might have adverse effects. For instance, the cursed Crozius was a thing. A chaplain's weapon tainted unknowingly, harming allies. Or the Demonifuge storyline, an Eldar artifact that had a demon inside that kept resurrecting, a sister of battle. Ephrael Stern, with warp powers, a blessing or curse. To her, it felt like both. And the orcs, their artifacts aren't cursed exactly, but if you pick up an orc weapon as a human, good chance it'll backfire or explode. Orc tech partly runs on orc belief, which humans lack. Not a curse, but you'll feel like it is when that jury-rigged shooter blows your arm off. One of the most famous individual cursed items is Fulgrim's Blade. During the Horus Heresy, Primarch Fulgrim wielded an alien layer sword that, unbeknownst to him, housed a powerful Slaaneshi demon. The demon subtly influenced him, amplifying his pride, his pursuit of sensation. When Fulgrim had a moment of doubt after killing his brother Ferrus Manus, the demon seized control of his body fully, literally body-snatching a Primarch. and Fulgrim's own consciousness was trapped in the blade as a spectator to his body's actions. Talk about a reversal. He thought the sword was his tool, but he became its tool. Eventually, after years, Fulgrim's soul reasserted and he ascended to demonhood, but for a time that sword curse cost him his very self. There's also the case of Inquisitor Quixos, who tried to use a demon sword for the Emperor's cause. It ended badly with him corrupted. Even something like a Lictor's bone sword, Tyrannid bioweapon, might be barbed with potent toxins that you can't wield safely if you're not Tyrannid. Not cursed, but effectively impossible for others to handle without great risk. Many a radical inquisitor or heretic has dabbled with Xenos, or warp artifacts that promised power and delivered disaster. You could write volumes of inquisitorial archives labeled "Objects Too Dangerous to Use," for reference only, do not touch. So a bit of advice. If you find an object in 40K that seems too good to be true, it definitely is. That pretty idol might contain a whispering warp entity. That cool chaos handgun might gradually fuse to your flesh. That elegant Eldar spirit stone. Don't even think about it. You might accidentally let an Eldar soul possess you, or, worse, attract Slaanesh's gaze. In game terms, these cursed artifacts often have crazy buffs with serious drawbacks. In lore terms, they create compelling stories of temptation. Will the hero use the forbidden weapon to defeat a greater evil, and at what cost to themselves? Often, the answer is tragic. Sometimes they manage to toss it aside after and atone. Other times, it's a slow decline into madness. But cursed artifacts add that monkey's paw element to the universe's narrative. Power comes at a price. In conclusion, a galaxy of damnation and dark irony. Curses in Warhammer 40,000 are as plentiful as the stars, woven into the very fabric of its grimdark lore. They can be biological or mystical, self-inflicted or imposed by malevolent gods, subtle or grotesquely overt. But they all share one thing, a dark irony that underscores the setting's theme that there is no escape from suffering, no matter how powerful or wise you are. The mightiest warriors become mindless beasts. The most advanced machines yearn for the flesh they left behind. The most devout servants of righteousness battle a monster lurking in their own hearts. Entire species bear the sins of their past like millstones around their necks. Every boon seems to carry a hidden bane. In the cursed cosmos of the 41st millennium, hope itself can be a poison. A spell to save your brothers turns them to dust. A pact to live forever damns your soul. A desire for perfection births the quintessence of depravity. Its storytelling turned to 11 on the Gothic dial, with curses being the Grim Reaper's laugh track at every tragedy. And yet, through all this, humanity and its allies, and even its enemies, persist. That's perhaps the final irony. To live in the Warhammer 40K universe is to live under a curse. The curse of unending war, of a future where there is only darkness and conflict. But they carry on. The Imperials still pray and fight and die, believing in eventual salvation. The Eldar, cursed though they are, still scheme for a brighter tomorrow, or at least a less horrible one. The Necrons awaken, undying, trying to reclaim glory despite millennia of damnation behind them. Even the Orcs, simple-minded as they are, break curses down to hit it until it stops. Bless their brutal hearts. We've journeyed through plagues that turn your body into sludge, battle brothers who become beasts, machines that crave human flesh, angels cursed with the thirst for blood, and blades that whisper promises even as they prepare to stab you in the back. Each tale serves as a grim reminder. In Warhammer 40K, every gift is suspect. every victory Pyrrhic, and every curse perhaps a twisted form of justice or humor by the uncaring universe. So, as we conclude this unmasking of the most horrifying curses of Warhammer 40K, take a moment to appreciate the dark tapestry they form. These curses and their victims lend the setting its depth of tragedy and horror. They are morality tales and nightmare fuel, warping not just bodies but destinies. And crucially, they ensure that even the greatest heroes walk with one foot in the shadow, always one misstep away from a fate worse than death. In the end, one might say the greatest curse of all in this universe is to be a part of it, to live and love and strive under an inescapable doom, be it personal or cosmic. But if there's one sliver of nobility amidst all that, it's that so many in 40K do not succumb without a fight. Cursed they may be, but they resist, often gloriously, if futilely, and perhaps that defiance is the closest thing to a blessing one can find in such a bleak reality. There is a saying among the more jaded scholars of the imperial ecclesiarchy: in life, war; in death, peace; in life, shame; in death, atonement. For the cursed of the galaxy, one might adapt it: in life, cursed; in death, well, even death is no release. Grim solace indeed, but that is the nature of this universe we love to explore from the safety of our imaginations. So, next time you crack open a Warhammer 40K story or watch a battle unfold, look for the curses, great and small, haunting the characters. They'll be there, shaping events, adding pathos to the carnage. And remember, if some mysterious stranger in the grim darkness offers you a deal that sounds too good to be true, it absolutely is. There's probably a curse with your name already etched in the fine print. In the nightmare future of the 41st millennium, curses are as eternal as war. Surviving them, outwitting them, or simply facing them with grim resolve, that's where legends are born. And that, dear listener, is the heart of Warhammer's dark allure. Even cursed humanity, and our Xenos, friends and foes, refuse to lie down and die quietly. They fight on, cursed but unbowed, defiant until the last. It's a powerful thing, the spirit to endure even the worst of fates. Perhaps in that there is something almost hopeful. A glimmer in the darkness? If so, it's the cruel kind of hope that only Warhammer 40K can provide. The kind that says, we're damned, but we'll damned well take the bastards with us. In a galaxy of curses, sometimes spitting in the eye of doom is the closest one gets to a happy ending.